Okay, so picture this. You're digging under a totally normal, modern parking lot. What do you expect to find? Pipes, maybe some old rubble. But what if you found something else? What if you found a history that an entire nation tried to bury? A history that just refuses to stay silent.
So this whole story kicks off back in 2009 in a coastal city in Portugal. And look, this wasn't some big, flashy announcement. It was quiet. It was unsettling. It was the discovery of something that had been hidden, literally, right under everyone's feet.
And the location here? Oh, it's absolutely crucial. We are talking about Lagos, Portugal. This is the city that, all the way back in 1444, became the very first gateway for the slave trade in Europe. So this isn't just any piece of land. You could say it's ground zero for a global tragedy.
So what did they find? Under a new parking lot, they found the skeletons of over 150 enslaved Africans, just discarded, buried in what was essentially an old garbage dump. These were people whose lives, whose stories were just completely erased from the landscape.
But what happens next, or really what doesn't happen, is the part that's just so telling. There was a plan, A museum was supposed to be built on the site to honor these lives, but it never happened. Instead, that history, it was literally paved over. A parking lot, a mini golf course, built right on top of a mass grave.
So it begs the question, right? When the official history just goes silent, who steps up? Who tells these stories? Well, that's where a group of incredible contemporary women artists comes in. They're the ones refusing to let this past be forgotten. It's like they're picking up the tools that the historians have just left behind.
We're going to be looking at the work of 5 of these artists in particular: Grada Colomba, Angela Ferreira, Eurita Sikala, Meghna Singh, and Monica de Miranda. Now, they all come from different backgrounds, but they have this one shared mission: to dig up these silenced histories and really to confront the ghosts that still linger today.
So one of the first ways these artists fight back against this collective amnesia is by becoming something like cartographers of memory. They're tracing the ghost routes of the transatlantic slave trade.
And sometimes, all it takes is one single event to just spark everything. And in this case, it was the discovery of a sunken slave ship, the San Jose. This discovery brought a truly harrowing story up from the depths of the ocean right into the public eye. And you better believe the artists were listening.
And the story of this ship? It's just horrific. It left Mozambique with about 500 enslaved Africans on board, all bound for the sugar plantations in Brazil. But it never got there. It wrecked off the coast of Cape Town. And while the crew survived, about half of the enslaved people drowned in the wreck. The other half, the survivors, they were just sold right there locally. And then, for 200 years, silence.
So let's look at how an artist like Eurita Sikala responds to this. She doesn't just, read about it in some dusty archive. No, she physically retraces the entire route. She travels to these places, documenting her own journey with these really haunting Polaroids. It's what she calls a poetic cartography, layering her own experiences and memories right on top of the ghosts of that past.
Okay, so we've looked at the geography, the physical journeys. Now let's shift gears and look at the economic engine that drove this whole thing. How did an empire even begin to justify and systematize turning human beings into commodities?
That's the incredibly provocative question at the heart of another one of Eurita Sikala's performance pieces. And it's a question that just cuts right to the core of the violent logic of the entire slave trade.
And here's how she explores it, which is just brilliant. She uses a literal set of scales. On one side, she puts a white wedding dress, this powerful symbol of Western purity of value, and on the other side, she weighs it against the raw materials that were plundered from Africa: ivory, salt, cotton, bone. The artwork just makes it so visually, chillingly clear how whiteness was made the standard, the thing that was used to measure and devalue not just African resources, but African lives.
Now, another artist, Grada Colomba, takes these same kinds of materials, but she uses them for something very different. In her installation, called Table of Goods, she makes this mound of soil mixed with sugar, coffee, and cocoa. The very products of plantation labor. And she surrounds it with candles. It becomes a memorial, a kind of burial ground for all the countless ancestors who were never even given one.
But okay, why does all this history matter so much right now? Well, because as these artists are arguing, the plantation, it didn't just disappear. Its logic, its trauma, is still shaping our world today. This is a concept that Grada Colomba calls plantation memories.
And the idea is pretty straightforward, but also profound. The structures of power, the dehumanization from the plantation system, they aren't just relics of the past. They're alive. They live on in the subtle and not so subtle acts of racism that happen every single day.
And Quilomba gives a voice to these experiences. She collects these really jarring, contradictory statements from real people. Just listen to the psychic whiplash of a sentence like this.
And then it's followed by this impossible flip side. See what's happening? Your blackness is used to define you, and then it's erased, all in the same breath. It creates this totally disorienting, no-win situation for the person on the receiving end.
Or how about this one? This is all about how your actual individual identity just gets dismissed in favor of a racist stereotype. Your real-life story? It doesn't matter. You're just expected to perform some kind of exotic version of blackness that fits into their little colonial storybook.
So, in her video installation, Quilomba has performers sit and just speak these truths directly to the camera, which means directly to us. They're giving voice to these incredibly painful, personal experiences, and in doing so, they transform that private trauma into this powerful public testimony. And it forces us, the viewers, to confront the echoes of the plantation in our own time.
So when you look at all this, it becomes so clear. These women aren't just making art. They're stepping in as historians where official history has failed. They're acting as archaeologists of memory. They're the storytellers for the silenced. And what they're building is a new kind of archive, a living archive of resistance.
And all of this really leaves us with one last crucial question to think about. When the official monuments are silent, when the museums are never built, when the ground itself is literally paved over, whose stories actually get to become our history? I think the work of these artists suggests an answer. That memory, it's like a root system, and it will always find a way to break through the concrete.